Hello and welcome to the Defining Your Niche podcast, where we explore alternative assets in commercial real estate, specifically self-storage and small bay flex. I'm your host, Thaddeus Campbell. Really excited to introduce somebody that I met on a event that we hosted a few weeks ago. Super insightful into this asset class, and one of the rare people I've ever come across who spent a career working in small bay flex. So really excited to welcome Jeff Paschal and want to thank you for taking the time. We've had to rearrange this a little bit, so really appreciate you working with me to get on here, and looking forward to asking some questions for the next half hour.
No, my pleasure.
First question, yeah, appreciate it, Jeff. And you're obviously from Texas, which makes perfect sense because this is a hotbed of this asset class. But the first thing I want to always ask when I have someone on the podcast is, how did you get into this really kind of niche asset? It's not something I think people don't grow up in sixth grade and say, hey, I want to go be involved in small bay flex.
Yeah, so I got in commercial real estate business and um, was originally doing tenant rep work in Dallas and enjoyed commercial real estate, but wasn't loving that aspect of it. You know, there's different things for different folks, and started looking around for other opportunities, and actually got hired by PS Business Parks, which was a commercial real estate publicly traded REIT that actually had a ton of small bay flex. So
What about this asset class why has it been so popular in that area, do you think? I've spent my last couple weeks looking across the East Coast, and there are not a lot of these properties. I've looked from Orlando up to New Jersey, yet in that Dallas Fort Worth area and really across Texas, this has been a really popular asset class.
you know, there's some folks that would tell you Dallas invented commercial real estate. At least that's kind of the mentality of some of the commercial real estate folks in Dallas. But no, it's more of a joke than anything. But um, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the Dallas Fort Worth area for sure that you know, through the late 70s, early 80s were looking at how they could build something that maybe differentiated from other things, and some of this product got built that was, you know, 800 to 2,000 square feet, small office warehouse space, and then kind of after the mid 80s, it went out of vogue because it was too expensive to build, and what people were willing to pay for it, or were, you know, had traditionally paid for that, you know, this type of product. Um, Deals didn't pencil for a long time, but that's flipped again.
Tell me what has led to that, because I'm fascinated by this piece of it. What has flipped that equation so that now, you were on the event with me. We
Yep.
didn't advertise. We paid no money for marketing for that event. We had 60 people on that event that are they're
Sure.
hyper interested in this asset class. What created that flip and has kind of put some momentum back into it?
You know, part of it is just the need. I mean, if you look around at the number of small businesses in America, there's like 35 million small businesses in America. Well, where are all these guys going? And traditionally, there was a lot of small businesses were more retail focused, and as retail has gone, I'm not going to say gone away, because retail is kind of getting hot again too, but it's different type of retail. You know, it's not the traditional big box, and it's not the same, you know, strip malls, big box strip malls, and certainly not malls anymore that are popular in retail. But a lot of the retail has gone from, you know, people walking into stores to people logging in online, and so that's been a part of it for sure. You know, when I was with PS Business Parks, we had a ton of vendors that were selling on eBay, or were selling through Amazon, and that sort of stuff. So, you know, those folks have to have a spot to keep their inventory, and you know, at some point, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, and you're in that section of the world, if you're doing it at your house, you know, eventually your spouse is saying, "I want my garage back." that sort of thing too. And so they're moving out of, moving out. We saw a ton of folks that would be moving out of their house, start a small business, move out of their house, need the next spot, but really they would skip mini storage because they needed to be with their product, they needed to be with their inventory, and so small bay flex made perfect sense for those folks.
I'm interested in this. You talked about those people creating small businesses in their house, and you come to a place where you got to get out because your spouse doesn't want you to have all your inventory there. Can you take me through a bunch of the different? One of the things we're attracted to here is just the variance in potential leases you can get in this space.
Sure.
Who are you seeing as different businesses renting this type of product?
Yeah, I mean, so our customer base was, we called it Small Business America. Um, whether it was an electrician, plumber, landscaping companies, roofing companies, those sorts of traditional home service based businesses. And then, online retailers, um, and, but then also service and repair companies, people that would take stuff to somebody to get repaired. You'd see folks like that. We steered very clear of automotive uses. Those small automotive uses would always call and want a lease from us, and the answer was always no. The one caveat to that is we would do window tint deals because that's not the same. You're not having wrecked cars sitting out there, or broken down vehicles, but we would even put things in their leases that limited the number of vehicles they could have on site, to to two, or that sort of thing. So it was a quick turn. And then those window tint folks would also, they would do projects offsite too. They would, whether it be residential or commercial office, or whatnot. But it's a big variety. But that's who small, that's what America is big variety of small businesses. And the other thing that we would see is, um, as the real estate market, or let's say the economy may take a downturn, we wouldn't necessarily see the same downturn in the product as people get laid off from big corporations in downturns. America's, we got resourceful folks. And so they're sitting there going, okay, well, what can I do now? And maybe my skill set isn't marketable to a big company right now. They're not hiring. Nobody's hiring in my sector. What am I going to do? Well, guess what? They go start another small business. And so I'm not going to say there's not dips in the market, but
Yeah, of course.
America's a lot more resourceful than you would give it credit for sometimes. And those folks are back in the market looking for, hey, I'm going to start this small business. Let's go do this. And those are the ones calling you during those times.
Such a common phrase in self storage is recession resistant, right? Because when
Mm-hmm.
there's a recession, people tend to move, and moving is the biggest driver of storage. It's so interesting that there's this similarity in the two asset classes where the same thing, when somebody loses a job, that we have an entrepreneurial country, right? People start these small businesses and need a place to have it. I'm interested to pick your brain a little bit about structure of leases in this is something we've been talking about as a partnership group. We're submitting for site plan approval today on our first ground up project, and talking a lot about, what are the leases going to look like? Are these 1 year leases? Are they 2 year leases? Are they 3 year leases? Are they 5 year leases? What
Sure.
was typical for you guys as you were leasing?
Yeah. So, when you're looking at leasing these properties, and a ground up like y'all are doing is a perfect example of how to view this is you want to spread out your expirations. And so you don't want to just say, hey, I'm going to do 24-month leases, because over the first 12-month period, you're going to be doing your lease up. And then once that 12 month is over, um, you're going to have 12 months of, hey, good stable cash flow. And then then you hit that 24-month point, and all of a sudden all my leases are starting to roll over the next 12 months again. And so you're going to have 100% of the property rolling all at once. Instead, you want to look at, how can you plan your expirations in the future? So don't be scared to do some 12-month leases. If you do 20 to 25%, maybe 30% 12-month leases, well, guess what? Those will be rolling in your second year of ownership. But you, once you get to that point of third year of ownership, you're not going to have 100% of your property rolling. Um, what we would do is, we would quote 12-month leases, or excuse me, 24-month leases. But we would talk to folks, figure out what their hot buttons were. We'd have folks that wanted 12 months. We would move down and do it. We'd have folks that wanted some stability. Hey, we may incentivize them to go ahead and do a 36-month lease. Um, and that way you're spreading out your lease roll, you're spreading out your future risk. Because one of the great things about this product type is risk mitigation. Instead of having a 40,000 foot project that's got one 40,000 foot tenant in it, you get a 40,000 foot project with 30 customers in it, and you've mitigated your risk. Well, if you have all of that expiring within the same periods of time,
And
you haven't
same
really
risk.
mitigated your risk. Let's
Uh,
spread that risk further. And the other thing is, I would always preach to my teams, hey, let's not get caught up in 12-month, 18-month, 24-month, 36-month intervals. It's possible to do a 19-month lease or a 21-month lease. Look at the expirations you've got. Look at that future schedule, and you got, hey, a 3-month period at some point, where you've got no expirations, and then you've got another 3-month period after that with a handful of expirations. Hey, it's okay to shorten the 24 months to 22 months so that you've spread out your risk a little bit.
you just gave so many insightful pieces that we hadn't even thought about. So I'm so it makes me really happy. This is why I like to have smart people. And it was very obvious when you were on our event that you just had some serious experience. That idea of
Yeah,
because we don't think about that.
I'll go with the experience part. I'm not sure I'm smart, but I
Well,
certainly got
listen, what you
experience in it.
said was super, super smart. And if that's a function of experience, God bless. It was great. Obviously, in storage, we don't really think that way because it's month-to-month leases and people move out
Sure.
randomly all the time. And
Yep.
to your point in storage, we've got if it's a 50,000 square foot facility, you could have 500 customers in that facility. So your risk is super mitigated from that standpoint. But I love this idea, and I want to pick your brain a little bit. Let's say we got a 50,000 small bay flex, 50,000 square foot small bay flex facility, and we're looking 1,500 to 2,000 square foot units. How many
Sure.
times did you have customers coming in there looking to maybe rent 3,000 or 4,500 or 6,000 and demising a bigger piece of the property?
It would happen occasionally, but not a ton. What happens more often is the guy comes in, rents 3,000 feet, or excuse me, 1,500 feet, and then 12 months from then comes back to you and says, I need more space, and then needs to expand. And that happens more often than the guy that's just showing up wanting the larger space. Um, there's there's inherent differences in something that's built 3,000 feet from the start versus something that's built 1,500 to 2,000 feet. Whether that be the bay depths, the bay widths, in order to hit those smaller square footage points. Once you get up to 4,000 feet, particularly, um, the spaces are getting both wider and deeper,
Yeah.
and they get more efficient when they do that. Um, and so, therefore, the folks that want 4,000 feet aren't necessarily going to show up to the place that has 1,500 to
15.
2,000 footers. But once they're in, then they definitely grow within the property. They'll grow up to, in my experience, up to about 6,000 feet before they would go, all right, it's probably just time for us to go find bigger space elsewhere.
Love it. So speaking of growth, I'm interested to tap in at obviously the idea of, hey, put some 12-month leases, put some 19 months based on your current roster expiration time. If you're out to 24 months or you're out to 36 months, what kind of escalations are you building into these leases?
Yeah, every market's different. Um, we tried not to look at it as per square foot amounts, but more just dollar amounts. And let's say, you know, if a space was leasing for $1,500 the first year, hey, let's make it 1,600 the second. And we would write them as triple net leases, but we would quote just gross dollars because that's what these a lot of these folks have never leased space before, and so you say, hey, this is going to be $15 triple net. You're going to look at you. They're going to be looking straight through you, trying to figure out what you just said.
Million percent.
They're not going to have a clue what triple net meant or
It
hey,
raised my hand. I didn't know what that meant a year ago. So
yeah. So, and really, they're modified triple net. True triple net is, a property that, let's say, Starbucks leases it, and then Starbucks is completely responsible for the roof, the structure, foundation, parking lot, all these things. This world, when you're going to quote triple net, it's going to be a modified, so that maybe the tenant's responsible for those items monetarily, but the landlord's doing the work. That way, you're ensuring the work gets done, um, and it also, the roof leak might be, new projects. You're not going to have any, hopefully, early on, right? But a roof
your
leak
lips to God's ears,
in an
Jeff.
older project might be at one spot, but actually leaking into another spot, and those sorts of
Yeah.
things. So, or parking lot repair that needs to be done. It's for everybody's benefit. So landlord doing it, but then passing that expense into the operating expenses. But back to the main question of what what are those bumps? We look at it as dollar amounts. You know, is it a $50 a month bump in the second year? A logical increase for these folks? Is it $100 a month? Is it 150, 200, 250? And it varies by space size. The smaller the space, the lower that dollar amount is, but that may be the same incremental increase on a per square foot basis as doubling it if the space is double the size.
Okay.
So from our standpoint, it would be 50-cent bumps or that sort of thing. But from the customer standpoint, they see a 50-cent bump on a 2,000-foot space is roughly $100 a month. So that's what we would quote them and they would see.
I love this theme, and again, something that I'm going to adopt, and my partners and I'll talk about of putting it in terms that the tenant is going to understand instead of
Yep.
how we would speak as commercial developers or people that acquire these commercial properties. We have a language, and your tenant isn't necessarily going to speak that language, so that's very
Sure.
well received and appreciate that advice. I want to dig in a little bit now to advice you would have for somebody relative to look. You can spend 40, 50, $60 a square foot building these things more, making them look fantastic, and how different your facades are, how different your interior build outs are. How do you go about identifying, hey, what's the right build type for this market? Do we go, especially these days when build costs are higher and interest rates are higher? It's, as you mentioned earlier, even though these are starting to pencil, they're still not penciling so great that you can afford to build a $150 square foot unit
Yeah.
in some markets where you could have done it for 100, 120.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. First of all, you want to look at your competition. You may say, "Hey, I don't have true competition in this product type," but you've got competition you've got product in the world. What's the product like? Are you in a more upscale community that people are going to frown upon a super basic product type? Um, and you'll be able to see that, when you look at the retail that's around you. You'll be able to see that when you look at the type of stuff that's gone into other industrial projects, even if it's larger industrial projects. And that'll help guide you to some degree. Obviously, building codes are going to, and requirements within municipalities are going to guide you on things that you have to do. And different products you have to use or how much glass you have to put across the front and those sorts of things. So make sure you're paying attention to your building codes and so forth. But really, it's for the most part, you're not going to get a whole lot of extra rent by putting a whole bunch of extra stuff. Putting some stone on it, nobody's going to pay extra for it. The reality is the plumber that's leasing from you, it may be his wife or daughter that's sitting in the office all day, but he's out doing work, and he's not paying extra for some stone facade added to the project. But you know what? Building code may dictate you need, a third or a fourth product. So maybe you put a little bit in order to, get through the construction portion and get your permit. But it's not going to be a big game changer on the rent you get. It's these folks are paying for functional space. They're not paying for beautiful space.
I love that. We're looking at a property recently where the code calls for 1/10 of the property to be landscaping, and it's a 17-acre parcel. So we're looking at a 1.7 acres of landscaping, right? Exactly. Yeah, a little bit different line item in the budget than we're used to on a project. But you're to your point, it's a lot of it's going to be determined by code. And again, appreciate when you're doing build out inside.
Yep.
Obviously you mentioned this, and it's something we feel very strongly about. The 80s is early 90s, really the last time we saw a ton of this type of product built.
Yep.
What are you looking at for clear heights? What are you looking at for setup of space versus office? Are you building out those offices to start and just have them ready to go, or would you leave the space open and demise it as you start to pull clients in?
So I am a big proponent of ready to lease space always leases faster. So if somebody, the folks looking for this product type generally aren't looking 4, 6, 8 months out. So they're looking next week, next month, maybe 2 months out. They don't plan ahead. They're not planning ahead to the same degree that Amazon's planning ahead for the next phase of warehouses they need to do. Right? It's just they're not. Um, and so I think you just have to have space ready to go, space on the ground ready to go. Um, Whether it's one office in the space, or two offices. I if it was me, I would plan a mix of the two, where you had just a single office, maybe some other spaces with two offices. As you get up to 2,000 feet, maybe you put a third office in, um, and build it from the start. And the reason I say that, in addition to these folks aren't planners, it also going to cost you less to build it from the start. If you're building out space one time, you're not recalling all these different trades to come back. It costs money every time that plumber has to come back to do something. And so if you're building out, one space and that plumber's there to do it, well, guess what? He could do that second, third, fourth, fifth, and all 62 spaces you're going to have at the property a whole lot cheaper than calling him 62 times to build out space. So there's going to be some economies of scale. Um, I wouldn't build out heavily every space, but I would have the restrooms in and at least one office in every space from the start. Um, if somebody's not going to use it, it's not a huge portion of the space. There's not going to be somebody that says, I'm not going to lease that space because I don't need the office. I'm going elsewhere. They're going to go, great, you have a space I can move into today and I'm ready to go. Um, in the call we did a couple of weeks ago, there was a guy that was building it out, as he went, and had some other area that was kind of common area and stuff. The downside to having that common area where you've got some common restrooms is now, as the landlord, you've got to clean that. You got to check on that. You've got to, and some of these users are going to be really high class users that are in this type of space. And
I
then some
love
of these users are not going to be
it.
the highest class users. And,
Yeah.
and, there's going to be conflict and stuff. Just go ahead and stick in a restroom in every space and saving yourself management headaches in the future with common restrooms and trying to keep those clean and keep common space conflicts to a minimum. If you get rid of that common space, you're not going to have the conflicts. So,
Jeff, man, I've gotten so much insight, and I personally have to thank you for this. I know the people
sure.
watching it are going to get a ton out of it because I certainly am going to have a meeting with my partners here in a couple hours, and we're going to talk about a lot of the points you made because they're things we've been talking about, we've been debating. So nice to get that information
Yep.
straight from somebody who's been in this space for so long. I want to ask you if somebody that's watching the podcast wants to get in contact with you and they want to try and pick your brain a little bit about maybe a project they're doing, or you can help
Sure.
them with something they're doing. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can probably text me first. And I say that because we get so many spam calls. It's hard to, it's
Love
easy
it.
to overlook phone calls from numbers you don't know. But my cell number is 469-877-5975. Shoot me a text, say, hey, let's set up a call. And then my email address is my last name, Paschal, PASCHALCRE, stands for commercial real estate. So pascalcre@gmail.com. So really simple on both those fronts.
Love that. Those will be rolling across the bottom of the screen thanks to my tech genius behind the scenes, Eric. People are not going to see how crazy this whole episode was getting it taped, but we went through some stuff. So Jeff, I want to thank we went through some stuff just getting it set up. So
Yep,
really thank you for bearing with me as I lost it on the guy in the restaurant kicking me out of the spot I was sitting in to tape the podcast. Jeff is a champ and so appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have a chance to bring you back on the podcast in the future.
certainly. Love to.
Thank you guys so
All
much
right.
for watching this episode of the Defining Your Niche podcast. He's Jeff Paschal. I'm Thaddeus Campbell. Listen, if you got something of value out of this, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, whether you're watching on YouTube or Apple's podcast or Spotify. We certainly appreciate you guys giving us a comment and giving us a thumbs up and following the show. Thanks, as always, to my friends at PropRise. They are outpacing the self-storage market with supercharged deal sourcing. Amazing guys. You can check them out through the link on the screen as well. And we'll see you guys next week.